This evening's Dharma talk is titled Drop One Fist. And the idea here with that kind of a metaphor or image is quite often when we feel some kind of internal antagonism, perhaps triggered by something out there, maybe something way inside of here, is the idea, the image that sometimes comes up, internal anxiety is like this kind of thing, like there's two fists hammering at each other. Sometimes that gets so intense, we actually go out and we might attack others physically, or we might not do that. We might just blame others with some kind of, what do they call this, weaponized speech these days, weaponizing things, weaponized Kleenex. So the idea is to look through your awareness practice, look and see the way in which these, it's kind of like two fists coming together. If you try to fight that all together, then it creates another kind of warfare with yourself that is, I don't know, it may feel like it helps for a little while, but fundamentally probably going to be circular. Fighting and then surrender, and then fighting and then surrender, and then fighting and then surrender. And so we're not saying to give up altogether, because I think if we try to give up kind of conceptually, just give up, I'm just going to drop it, I'm just not going to do that anymore. Something about that approach involves a fluffing up, very subtle fluffing up of our self-centeredness, our ego, like I'm the one who's going to control myself. It may be a misunderstanding of what's going on. So it's just it's a suggestion. It's a form of meditation in action, you could say. Could happen on the cushion, but likely out in your everyday environment where world, other people, situations, employers, friends, neighbors, whatever, partners giving you a rough time, or you're giving yourself a rough time. So it's like using the idea of a fist. We see that everywhere. There's a fist that's coming out at us, or the fist that's going back into ourselves, blaming ourselves. It might not be like this. This is the tension part, and this is the warfare part, but then we start to attack ourselves. It's like hitting ourselves like this. And it may help us to feel maybe a little better, because, well, it's like, well, at least we're doing something. At least we're not blaming others. We're taking all the blame. But something about that kind of blame is incomplete. So dropping the other fist, it's bring the awareness in so you can even see that there's like two fists there, and take part of that, see if you can set it aside. If you have an awareness practice going where you're strengthening that which sees and not that which thinks, that which sees. If you're really seeing, then thinking is kind of secondary. Not always, but quite often. It's the openness that we're trying to, say, strengthen or develop in our lives, in our personalities, in our going into the store and buying something, and working with other people, and standing in line and watching the stress that happens all over. Not to mention the stress that might happen in our own close encounters of the intimate kind. Is that a movie? No. I'm just looking to see who laughed at that. I know Kevin didn't laugh. Kevin rarely laughs. So it's, this kind of image may not work for you. It may work. You may think of that. You may think about, how can I come in and take a kind of a halfway measure, kind of go into the intention and move a piece of it away, take some of it away and settle it down, and use your awareness in such a way, if the image of a fist works, then maybe you could do that. Set some of that aside. And in that way, the awareness is able to see more clearly what's going on. And then the other fist, the other intention, or the other anxiety part, or warfare, whatever, then it gives that a chance to you can't, there needs to be two things to have have some kind of war. So what you're doing is you're using your awareness to take the very distress that you're feeling deeply. Not saying anybody's particularly distressed, but if you are, which does happen, see if you can see deeply into that where you can divide it up a little bit so that you can get some kind of, what I'm saying is open it up so there's some kind of ventilation or some kind of softening of that, enough to set some of it aside. If you set some of it aside, then you haven't gone to war with the warfare. You haven't, not particularly fighting with it, but you're giving in a little bit. Trungpa Rinpoche, my teacher, would say it very simply using one of our ideograms. Give an inch. Give a little bit. Give an inch. Give up a little bit. Not, you don't have to give away everything, but give an inch. Drop one fist. And then you'll notice if you can do that and using that image, and you may not use that image, you may use something else, but there's something about doing it halfway measured, halfway, that allows you to see the antagonism that it is without an enemy. The antagonism that has no enemy, that is just kind of energy swirling in space, looking for something to connect with. What is this about? It's about awareness. It's not about solving any problem. If you see the problem, if you see deeply the way our minds are knotted up in self-centeredness, knotted up in feeling like we're somebody who needs to be advanced, who needs to be not disrespected, if you can see the way in which that works, then just the awareness itself seems to be enough of a solvent to that fixation, enough to slowly dissolve that. It's like that. And again, dependent on how the way in which your karma, causes and conditions, brought you into such a situation to be at war with yourself or with others. That also has to be considered. Everything is dependently arisen. That means that whatever you see as one thing doesn't have its own basic identity. It has a name. It's a piece of wood. It's one half of these clackers. That I'm not sure why I'm doing that, but I started doing that a long time ago. And is there a reason for doing that? Sheldon likes those. Okay. Sheldon. That's who did it. So anything you look at, anything you can name or point out as anything is dependent on everything else. It's dependent on everything else around it for its apparent singularity, identity, description, and so on. So if we go into that situation as if we can somehow arm wrestle the whole thing and get something to work and one thing to stop and the other thing to, more peace, less war. If you do that, the very nature of that kind of activity that's how war works. There's always some kind of justification behind it. Well, it's only reasonable that we look what they're doing to us. We have to attack them, so you see it all over the place. Sometimes it gets so intensely confused that it's comical, if it weren't for being extremely dangerous. So see if you can bring, next time you are anxious or irritated or feeling angry, distressed about something, see if you can locate the anger. Usually it's somewhere in this area. And the heat might even be higher than that. It might be adding to that by our thought process around it about how this isn't going right, this is going against me, I've been wronged. Or however it may be, whatever the story is behind it. See if you can bring awareness into that without doing anything about it. Very difficult to prioritize the awareness over the activity of solving the problem, because quite often, unless there's a whole lot of clarity here already, if you get anywhere near warfare, you're probably going to be sucked into it, even if it's none of your business. You might notice that when you see two people arguing or fighting, you can feel, especially if you tend to identify with one side of it, we tend to feel that anger or rage. Quite often, and this isn't always the case, but quite often what is happening is unexamined distress or anger that is deep in your consciousness has been unexamined. It's been packed away. It's just come up at times when you could have looked at it, but you might have even said on some level, well, I'll look at that later on. And somehow you were able to move it to the back of the bus, so to speak, put it way back so you can, other file cabinets in the other room. But when something happens right in front of you and it's on the same frequency or the same vibration or the same resonance, whatever fancy word you want to use, somehow that out in front of you in present time and space or place resonates with that, and the anger that would have been relative to this simple situation of pushing and pulling gets really, really pronounced because this anger that has not been examined or has been stuffed or has been ignored, use one of the three poisons, passion, aggression, and ignorance. The ignoring part is very hard to see. The very nature of ignoring makes it hard to see. So that brings that out into the open and makes us perhaps feel even more upset or enraged. Brett?
What can we do when something like that arises and we just feel completely laminated to it?
I think probably everybody here can say that on some level that's happened. It certainly has happened to me. It's happened to me in the last week. So when things get really, really intense, insofar as you can, do nothing with it. I mean, listen to it, look at it, feel of it, taste it, bring all of your sense feels to it. Don't run away from it, and don't necessarily add anything to it. Don't do any math at all. No subtraction, no addition, no nothing. Just feel that, because more than likely, and there's no guarantee, but more than likely, the only way you're going to dissipate that kind of lamination, as you used the word, is to just bring awareness to it. So the awareness itself can function as a solvent or to dissolve it, because it just brings a lot of ventilation into the situation rather than taking the situation as real and fighting with it or pushing it away or ignoring it. Passion, aggression, and ignorance. All three of those tend to, it might solve the problem temporarily, just like getting mad at someone sometimes and just yelling or swearing or whatever might bring some temporary relief. It can also do the opposite. It can make us feel terrible. We might have gotten rid of something, but there's something kind of, I don't know, sickening about a lot of rage and intensity. So quite often people who have no awareness practice, and I'm not saying you have to meditate, I think it's a good idea, but I'm very biased in that area. So people who don't have an awareness practice and try to do everything through their thinking, their analysis, they try to live their whole life that way, and awareness takes a back seat. Awareness is just a servant of the thought process. This is called ego. And it can be very, very kind and peaceful and loving and everything. I'm not saying it's some kind of criminal, but it's still operating an orbit around a very strong self-centeredness. And that self-centeredness can be very kind, very considerate, very polite, until it's challenged. And I don't mean you go and challenge it. I'm saying if that situation, which is what's called a healthy ego, if it's threatened, then it's going to bring out the big guns. And who knows what lifetime those are coming from. And I'm not necessarily promoting belief in anything, past lives or anything else. Further questions would be good if you have them. Junchu?
In the beginning you said we can't just drop the whole thing. So if we see the two fists coming together, we can't just drop the whole thing. What is the difference between, or how does it look different to drop one fist as opposed to just giving up the whole?
Yeah. I think the one allows the ego mind, the self-centered mind, to not completely lose. and to not completely go underground and come up in another area and restart the war. So it's like a little bit of a negotiation. You say, well, I'm going to drop one fist. So I'm going to, you could say, I'm just going to not do anything yet. So I mean, that can show up lots of different ways depending on your own personal, how you work with anger already, how you work with any kind of intensity. And, you know, everyone does this a little differently. So everyone in here would probably describe what it feels like to be angry or mad in a different way. And so it would be your particular style. So the practice is sit a lot, of course, do a lot of sitting meditation so that that part of the consciousness is strong and is already very much used to not accepting, not rejecting, and not looking away. If you sit and look at the wall for many hours, or at the floor, or wherever your meditation is aimed, over long periods of time, just observe what moves. That seems to strengthen the ability to just observe something without taking sides, without picking and choosing. And that we get better and better at that as we go along. We'll notice that we're sitting, and we'll notice that very negative kinds of feelings and emotions can come up. We know it's a little bit different in the way this worked, say, 3 months ago or 3 years ago. There's a little bit more of an ability to just watch it, more like you're watching a stage play. So very much like sometimes it's like watching a horror movie. You know how I'm not saying you guys are scaredy cats, but if I'm watching a horror movie, I might think of some reason to go to the kitchen. I'm just going to get some popcorn or something. But it's very difficult, even if you know it's real. I mean, even if you know it's a movie, you know, it can get so suspenseful. We're so sensitive to everything that as soon as this terrible thing comes up, somebody's around the corner and somebody's walking down the hallway and they don't expect anything to happen. And there's just, well, they might laugh at that, but that's better. There's something around the corner and it's scary. And we look at it and we want to say, don't go there. I mean, at the same time, we know it's a movie. It's a movie. Somebody wrote this. Somebody produced it. Somebody acts in it. Somebody is the stage manager. Somebody controls the set. Somebody controls the makeup on the zombie. And we know all this, but we still get afraid. Or at least I do. And Onyo can't watch scary movies at all. Can you?
I go to the kitchen a lot.
She just stays in the kitchen. But she'll even say, don't watch that. I don't want to watch that. That's too scary. And then there are other people who are actually entertained by that because maybe they have more of an ability to say, well, this isn't real. That can never happen. I don't happen to have that ability. Everything looks possible to me, especially zombies. So, know what I'm saying?
You're looking for zombies.
Looking for zombies. Yeah, that would be a good title of a talk. I don't know what I would say, but it probably would. Huh?
That would be a great talk.
Looking for zombies. I'll give that talk next Sunday. So, the further questions about working with anger? Yes, Junshu.
If we're irritated or maybe fighting with someone else,
Yeah.
and dropping one fist can sometimes feel like failure.
Yeah. Let me interrupt you. That's how that means you've dropped a fist. That's actually a feedback for you to let you know that you're dropping a fist. There's a willingness. It might only be in microseconds or micro inches or whatever, but there's a willingness to lose. You've heard me say, I've even done calligraphies that say lose the war. Huge calligraphy. I did several of them. I've done to say lose the war. So I don't even know what that means. I don't know why I'm even saying it. I don't want to lose the war. Why do I say that?
Winning.
Huh? That's the only way to win. Yeah. So it's just how if you understand what you personally, what you've been through in your life with the different the situations of having to deal with anger and frustration, other people being angry with you, you being angry with others, like, as I said, even if you can see that it's, it's kind of mocked up, it's made up kind of stuff, still could be extremely difficult. And so I would say that's why they call it a practice. Just continue to do it and continue to work with it that way. Watch your own anger. Don't try to get rid of anything. You'll never hear me say anything like, just let go or just give up. I don't say that because it's crappy advice, because it's not based on how one feels. So if someone is having a difficult time and someone else with all their highfalutin peacefulness comes along and says, well, just relax, or just give up, or just be peaceful. That's irritating, because you've already you've tried the very things that they're talking about, and they are not working. So what I'm saying here, basically, what I'm emphasizing is the awareness part of it. Bring as much awareness in you can, and bring as little expectation in as you can. In other words, it's something you're willing to do no matter what happens, without results. Looking for results we're right back into relative truth again, and we are endeavoring to live, according to these teachings, we're endeavoring to live in reality, which is not two, it's non-dual. The ancient teaching, Indian teaching, is Advaita, not two. Everything is dependently arisen. Yes?
A question from Shane out in California.
Shane.
He asks, do all difficult/negativity episodes that one has ever experienced that have been stuffed eventually have to come back up?
I don't know. Sure, it looks like it sometimes, but I don't really know. I don't understand. The only thing I understand about consciousness is what I've understood from looking at it for close to 50 years, trying to understand what this is. So I'm not able to necessarily speculate on whether this would happen with everyone, or looks like you're kind of, if you're on this path, it looks like you're willing to see what is true for yourself. You're here and you're doing this because you want to understand. You don't want to believe in this or believe in that. And my teacher, Trungpa Rinpoche, once said, the reason you need the teacher is so you can leave them. So you need the teacher so you can leave the teacher. That doesn't mean you necessarily run away from the teacher or abandon the teacher. It just means that you need someone to help you fundamentally in a way that is genuine, that is honest, that is straightforward, and that is based on awareness and realization rather than a lot of thought process or judging. And then you find that you don't even really leave anybody. It's like you're not separate from that consciousness or that awareness or that teacher anymore. I think Trungpa Rinpoche was just saying that so you wouldn't feel like you're a prisoner. You get to leave him someday. I'll tell you when. Yes.
Question from John in North Carolina. Actually,
Yes.
He has two questions. His first one.
What color is the sky?
No, that wasn't one of them.
Oh, okay.
He asks, when we simply meet whatever comes up without engaging in the three poisons, is this what is meant by liberating the myriad of beings?
It could be. It could be, but without engaging the three poisons is a little fishy, because the three poisons may get engaged and they may not. It's whether there's a self there or not. It's whether there's an identity that is central, that has a center and a fringe. If there's no center, no fringe, and there's just the three poisons coming and going, then that may be what's being pointed at.
His second question, is this kind of open-ended, and he has that in quotes, awareness a form of compassion? Thank you.
Compassion is to give, as I've said recently. Give what? Give your attention to everything. So if you're really giving your attention to everything, then if you're really doing that, that's a profound form of generosity, kind of invisible because people may not feel like you're giving much, but you're giving your attention. Then if somebody is in need and is giving you their permission, if they're open and they need your help, then you'll see possibly how to help them. Whereas if you haven't given someone your attention, then you may think up ideas about them rather than actually see what is fundamentally there. So I don't know if I answered your question or not, John.
Sokuzan from Traverse City has a question.
I know her.
She asks, what's the difference between the right fist and the left fist?
Well, they're the same and different. They're the same in that they're both doing the same thing, and they're different in that you drop one. But you may not see two fists. You may just see rage. That's why I'm saying it seems to me necessary to drop the awareness, you could say, into the gut where the rage is going on, or up into the head where the rage is going on, and see that hammering going on, that arguing with yourself about it. They shouldn't, I should, they should, and on and on. It seems to be necessary until we break it down into some parts. It may be difficult to drop part of it. You may not be able to even do this. This may be a metaphor, or an image that doesn't even work for you. Junshu.
How do we drop the situation into its parts?
See that it has parts. Just like if we look at the way the Buddha did in ancient times, is to break down the physical appearance of or experience of being a living being into the 5 skandhas, of the 5 heaps: form, feeling, perception, concepts of the thinking process, and consciousness, of the 6 sense fields and the objects that are completely coming into them all the time: taste, touch, colors, sounds. That altogether, those 5 parts and all of their various subtle nuance do not make up a self. It sure seems like it. It's a powerful illusion of being somebody who can win or lose. And this non-duality isn't just here, but it's the biggest form of duality that we believe in. We just totally believe in life and death. That's a misunderstanding. There's a difference between life and death, but fundamentally they aren't separate. You can't have life without death. You can't have death without life. I read recently where, I can't remember exactly what I was reading. I read a lot. Maybe it'll come back. The most difficult death is, from the point of view of doing, is someone who died said this. So don't ask me how I know about that. I'm in touch with, I have this special phone booth. Yes. That's me again. So someone who said that dying is so easy and so ordinary that consciousness may not even realize it's died. It's birth that's the difficult one. That's the one where you're coming out of spirit and coming back into physical manifestation. I remember a very early memory I had was probably 2 or 3 years old. It was a memory that it was like looking around, and it wasn't very complicated, and it wasn't particularly philosophical, because I was a little tiny person, maybe somewhere around that size or smaller. And I said, in my mind's ear, I said, why did I come back here? But I said that not knowing where I'd come from or what I'd come back to, particularly. So there's a big polarity, life and death. And they're not separate. They're separated, yes, but not separate. Any polarity you can find, anytime you see 2 different things, they get their meaning from each other. It's on one level, it's just a very simple insight. It's just a tacit understanding, very simple understanding about it. And it's so simple that it actually, if you actually do it totally, this is realization. Realization is not, even though they have shiny Buddhas and light coming out of the head, and I mean, how else are you going to talk about it? You know, why would you have it be just, you know, a person laying on the floor wrapped in rags?
Do what totally? I didn't follow that.
I say, how would you communicate the complete power of realization without doing something? You know, we have a Buddha 2,500 years ago. We have a carving. We have it gold leafed. This is really no different than any other object in the room, but it's a way of like having a temple, having a monastery, having a meditation practice, so that we can actually emphasize the awareness part, because the awareness part, or the consciousness part, when death comes without warning, the consciousness part doesn't do anything. It's the body that drops away. The consciousness part is still there, and was there before we became incarnated, and will be there afterwards, because it's not hooked into time and space. So we just need a way to talk about that. All religions, it seems, come up with some kind of hocus pocus, and I don't mean that disparagingly. I'm just saying it. Sometimes it seems like, just like all the sutras we did, all the fancy stuff, we're chanting and everything. It's just a way of reminding us that, you know, we could work with this life in a from a spiritual perspective, rather than just a totally materialistic, I got to get ahead, I've got to win, I've got to beat everybody, I got to be the best, and all that. So, just, yes.
Shane has two more questions from California.
Okay.
His first one is, do thoughts analyze themselves?
Sean?
Shane.
Oh, well, then in that case, let's see. That's a real puzzler. That's almost as hard as, what's that, Sudoku? Sudoku, that's really hard. Do thoughts, well, a thought is just a manifestation, so I don't know if I think it takes some kind of a push to be able to go into that. So there needs to be something that wraps around that and continues to check into it. So I don't even know what a thought is. I just know that there seems to be a whole truckload of them coming and going. But as far as we know what they do, they get in our way. And they come, they hang out for a while, and they either make us happy or make us feel sad or add to our confusion about things or whatever. But there's no substance to them. We can't, like, I can't have your thoughts. We just know that we have things that we're calling thoughts. So, do you have a question? No. You were just waving at me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No. Mm-hmm.
His second question, can hate arise without a belief in its truth or non-truth?
I suppose there's. I understand what he's endeavoring to track there, but I suppose if it's something is triggered out of fear, sometimes xenophobia is really powerful. If you suddenly are afraid of something there's some kind of conditioning that's out of sight around the corner that has to do with your karma. Use that word. Maybe, I don't know. I'm not sure what's provoking that particular question. So, I don't know. I'm not following that too well.
Kozan has another question.
Yes.
She asks, what's the difference between spirit and a soul?
Well, there are two concepts. Spirit, soul seems to point to something that is a little bit more solid idea, and some theistic traditions usually use the word soul. Non-theistic traditions might use the word spirit. Some people have, I don't know, there's all kinds of other words. Anyone think of any other words for that kind of, huh? Mind could be mind. Consciousness. Consciousness doesn't really have can function without a body, without a physical form. So I think it's a puzzle, because there are teachings that say that even the soul, and this is why spirit might work a little bit better, can actually break up into different parts, that you can actually be living other lives right now. So, and that's, I like to say it this way, then it's not something to believe or disbelieve. You're much better off to not believe or disbelieve, and that way everything is open, everything is seen for what it is, rather than chasing it down with I don't believe it, or saying I do believe it, or putting any kind of thought patterns on top of things. Anytime you name something or think of something, you tend to cover up at least part of it with ignoring. Robert?
So then death and birth be a connection between those lives, possibly?
How do you mean?
As an entrance from life to life, if time is irrelevant, then there has to be some sort of form entrance and leaving. So
yeah.
Would that be the potential between all the connections, the gold line per se?
Probably. I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we're on the same
Sounds
page
good.
there. I don't know either. I mean, I'm up here and I'm giving a talk about it, but I'm addressing things that I'm not all that clear about myself. And what I am clear about is anytime you lock down on anything, you ignore everything else. So insofar as you can, yeah, keep open hands, and don't land anywhere. Don't even land in Buddhism. Don't land anywhere. And you could say, well, what have you done? You've certainly landed somewhere. You're wearing a robe and you present yourself as somebody who knows stuff. Are you saying that? So I'm working on it. Fundamentally, I couldn't do this if I landed somewhere, because I would be way too vulnerable to criticism. I'm extremely sensitive to what people think, and have been since I was born. So that is not the case anymore. So you please, go ahead and criticize me. If you do very much, I probably won't come back. But I'm just saying that I'm so sensitive to what others think. Still am. It's just that there's less of a me behind all of that. So therefore, I spent easily 30 some years looking at that. Junchu.
If you haven't landed anywhere, then how do you show up here?
Who, me? Must have made a mistake. I don't know what to do. So it tends to be choiceless, and I know that's a difficult term or word to explain to people, but it's not really making decisions. Something that I had to do. I often say to people who, if they want to officially become a Buddhist, sew a raksu or robe or something, or even want to be a student of mine, I say, don't do anything unless you have to. If you don't have to do it, don't do it. And all I'm really saying is, just be really sure. Don't do it just for the hell of it. Some organizations actually will try to get you to say, well, the next thing you need to do is sew a raksu or sign on the dotted line and become a member or pay dues. Excuse me. I'm not making those organizations wrong, but I'm just saying we don't do that here. So you need to have, it's your path, and it's respected. If you come, it's respected. If you leave, it's respected. Do whatever you need to do. Trust yourself. I trust you. I don't mistrust. There's anybody here I don't completely trust. I mean, if you're going to say, well, let's just test that guy. I'm going to go out and murder somebody right now. So do you trust me? I would say, what would I say to that? Yeah. So I keep her around. Did you hear what she said? don't do anything unless you have to. But you know, like it says on the little pillow in the room in there, has anybody read that pillow? It said, you may have to kill somebody. That's not for you to hear, Ruby.
I know, but I saw it.
Well, I made the big mistake of saying that in a talk one time a couple years ago or something. I said, you know, I'm just trying to say, you know, your karma may come along and knock you right off your feet and take you in a direction you thought, I don't want to do that. But when I said you may have to kill somebody, I didn't mean that would necessarily come up. I'm just saying karma is really, really powerful. And you know, if you go look in the mirror and you want to see how powerful it is, how much did you have to say over how you look, how you think, who you are, what your identity is, what your IQ is, what your race is, what your sex is? Nothing. We just show up here as a little tiny person. People give us a name and tell us what to do. You know, eat your cereal. You know, and slowly we get acclimated to that. We get conditioned to live in a society of human beings. So then Kevin Townley, one day a pillow shows up in the mail with that. He had one of his friends sew a pillow that says you may have to kill somebody, with a bloody knife on it too. I like that. Yes.
What are you actually advocating in this talk? I mean, on the one hand, you say karma is, I forget how you put it, but karma is intense or very strong.
It is.
But this talk is about being aware of anger as it arises.
Yes.
At what point do we just act out the anger, and do we actually have any choice in acting out that anger or responding to someone reactively, for instance? Excuse me.
You have some choice, but not a lot. But it's if you're really clear about what choice is, and if you've spent some time training your mind so you can see the bad neighborhood, so to speak, showing up 4 or 5 blocks away, then there's a possibility you can avoid going into that kind of a horrible situation. So that's what I'm saying, of just more awareness, so that whatever karma arises for you personally or me or anyone else, my goodness, if I hadn't met my teacher in the early 70s, I don't think I would be alive. Not because there was just too much anger. And the anger would go out towards others and then come back towards me. It was just really intense. Maybe I would have made it, I don't know, but I don't know. It doesn't seem like it. It was pretty scary at the time. So, and how did he help me? He said, sit down, find out who you are, make friends with yourself. So, and I spent many years doing that, and following his instructions and following his teachings and practicing what he told me to do. So, yeah.
Are you suggesting that karma is something that can be refined?
Maybe. Karma is, it's basically the word karma is Sanskrit for cause and effect, or action. This happens, that happens. But what we miss is the dependent origination. We think that what happens to us is actually that is causing something to happen to us. But by spreading the awareness or stretching the awareness, we begin to see that it isn't just tit for tat. It isn't just that simple cause and effect situation. It's extremely complicated and elaborate. And so therefore, whatever's coming towards us is a combination of just many, many tendrils of karma, all converging on one point, coming together as an action or a reaction. So I would say you can't particularly get control, but you may be so aware of it that you won't be at the mercy of it. That's kind of what I'm saying. When I say you may have to kill somebody, you may have to do something like that, I don't know. Sometimes people, it's been in my experience that in the past where I've just not been able to control that particular situation. So, yeah, I don't know. But I think more awareness is better, yes.
So in such an instance, when you have more awareness of what's going on in front of you, and you're watching yourself, as you put it earlier, go out and hurt somebody.
Yeah.
What is the difference between the person that is doing that with rage, with anger, with a self, and a person that is doing that with no self, but all that rage and anger is still there.
If there's no self, the rage and anger probably is not going to find it's probably not going to find a hook in anything. It may come up, but it would just happen in the consciousness of one who has seen through and transcended the personal self and the attachment to other. But that's transcendence.
So are you saying it wouldn't arise as an action, verbally or physically?
It may, but the not as less. There's less chance of that getting a hold of anything. There isn't anything really to grasp onto. There's no self. There's just the self-existing quality of the anger. The anger just arises in space, and it still may be very difficult for the person that's dealing with that. But they wouldn't necessarily clench their fists. So, and you know, we could discuss this for a while, and we may get somewhere, we may not. I think the most important thing that anybody can do is to train their mind. Sit down, hold still, whether you have a sangha or a teacher or a teaching or whatever, but training your mind seems to be really important. So if there's less chance in your life of engaging in that kind of circular activity of winning and losing and winning and losing and winning and losing. More?
Well, isn't this discussion part of training our mind?
Yeah.
Are you pointing at a different kind of training of mind?
I don't know.
Training mind?
What do you think? How does it look to you?
Well, I'm curious if there is a difference in having this Dharma talk and asking questions,
Yeah.
feeling responses, or some other thing that you're pointing at when you say train the mind.
What I'm saying
directly, what
Yeah.
is
training your mind. Well, this is part of it. Yeah, this is part of it. Asking questions of a teacher, or having a discussion with other people in the sangha about the teachings. That's training the mind. Practicing the forms, and also training the awareness to. This is what we do when we do sitting meditation, to see more clearly. So when we get up off the cushion and go out into our everyday highly charged and polarized life, culture, families, and so on, that when things arise that are difficult, or however they arise, that we are able to see them more clearly and less likely to go into praise and blame. So training the mind, there's a little of each. There's, as it's been said in the traditional way of saying, the wings of the bird. There's the one wing, which is the conceptual thinking mind, the concepts and so on. And then there's the other wing of the bird, which is the intuition or the awareness practice. Both of those seems to be necessary. So you meditate.
not so much? No.
Well, some. Jesse, you meditate?
More than I do.
All right. Ruby meditates. I saw you meditate a little bit. A little bit, yes.
William Murray from up in Grand Rapids.
Yes, William.
He asks, you mentioned that you may have to kill someone. Can that mean yourself?
Well, sure. But it's not a good idea. It's probably not as bad as it looks to all of us. I mean, but it's not a good idea because it's so circular. You just come back and have to go through the same lessons again, the way I understand it. You have to, if you do that, then you have to come back and go through a very similar kind of lesson. So don't do that, William. William's not thinking of doing that. I think he's thinking of maybe killing someone else. Yes, Shoka.
Sokuzan, one time you've said that this body isn't yours to take.
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
It's just another way of saying egolessness. I mean, look and see how we, as we grow up, we slowly take possession of, this is my body, my everything, my stuff, my environment, my skill, my ability, my lack of skill and ability, we just tend to see everything through some kind of subjectivity. So, what's your question? the whole idea of identity is just it doesn't have any traction there. I mean, it does as long as there's you could say, well, obviously this is I'm the one who's feeling this, but if you notice in the Zen tradition, because of realization of those who are realized, will sometimes say, something completely contradictory to that in order to help you see that your presumptions, your preconceptions about the nature of the world of reality are not particularly true. They might say, I can't, none of them are coming up. Does anybody remember any of those Zen stories?
I eat beans, you fart.
I eat beans, you fart. Yeah, there's a good one. Who said that? Some guy with a funny name. Yeah, so I do something and you have the result. So it's just a way of saying, putting a little bit of just interfering with the stability of fixation on itself and the fixation on the results of something. This happens, therefore this is the result. So there's some of that going on, but there's also an extended form of that begins to show up if one practices sitting practice of meditation. One begins to see more and more the complete lack of solidity in the self-centeredness, and also the lack of solidity in others. But it's not something to be believed. This is not a spiritual path where you believe one thing and disbelieve another. So it is about awareness rather than some kind of philosophical existential positioning on something. Very good. Thank you very much.
We'll stand and dedicate the merit in the back of your red tent. I'd like to remind everybody we do have a donation, two donation boxes out in the hallway. We certainly appreciate and need your financial support. Help us as much as you can. We also accept donations through PayPal and through debit and credit cards and checks in the mail.
May the gifts penetrate into all places so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's ways. Ji-ho-san, shi-shi-hu. Shi-son-bu-sa-mo-ko-sa. The 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita.
O Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions and the 3 times, please hear us. Please come down out of the light and protect Sokukoji Buddhist Temple Monastery, our Sangha, families, friends, and visitors.